The Idiot was published in 1869, during a particularly turbulent period in Fyodor Dostoevsky's life. After returning from a decade-long exile in Siberia, where he had been sent as punishment for his involvement in a radical political group, Dostoevsky faced severe financial difficulties and the loss of several close family members. These personal struggles, as well as his deepening religious and philosophical convictions, shaped much of his writing during this period, and The Idiot reflects many of these influences. The novel was written in the shadow of Dostoevsky's previous work, Crime and Punishment, which had solidified his reputation as one of Russia's leading novelists. However, The Idiot represented a significant departure from the grim, psychological realism of Crime and Punishment. In The Idiot, Dostoevsky sought to explore the concept of absolute goodness in the figure of Prince Myshkin, a character inspired by the Christian ideal of Christ-like innocence and purity. This idea of creating a positively good man was a central motivation for Dostoevsky in writing The Idiot, and it reflects his growing interest in Christian morality, faith, and the idea of salvation. Dostoevsky was also deeply influenced by the political and social changes occurring in Russia at the time. The mid-19th century was a period of great upheaval marked by the abolition of serfdom, rapid industrialization, and the rise of radical political movements. These changes created a sense of disorientation and moral uncertainty among many Russians, and this atmosphere of social instability is reflected in the novel's setting. The characters in The Idiot navigate a world that is morally ambiguous, where traditional values are being challenged by new, more materialistic ideologies. Dostoevsky's personal experiences with epilepsy also play a significant role in the novel. Prince Myshkin suffers from epilepsy, and many of the descriptions of his seizures are drawn from Dostoevsky's own experiences with the condition. The epilepsy in The Idiot is more than just a physical affliction. It becomes a symbol of Myshkin's otherness, his vulnerability, and his connection to a higher spiritual reality. In the novel, Myshkin's seizures often coincide with moments of heightened emotional or spiritual insight, further reinforcing his role as a Christ-like figure. Despite his noble intentions, Dostoevsky struggled with the execution of the novel. Writing under intense financial pressure and with looming deadlines, he produced The Idiot in a relatively short amount of time, which resulted in certain structural and thematic issues. Critics at the time were divided in their reception of the novel, with some praising Dostoevsky's ambition and originality, while others criticized its disjointed plot and uneven pacing. Dostoevsky himself was never entirely satisfied with the novel, once referring to it as a failure because he felt he had not fully realized his vision of creating a perfectly good man. However, in the years since its publication, The Idiot has come to be regarded as one of Dostoevsky's most important works. Its exploration of moral innocence, its complex characters, and its deep philosophical and psychological insights have made it a classic of world literature. Prince Myshkin, in particular, remains one of Dostoevsky's most enduring and enigmatic characters, a figure who embodies both the potential and the limitations of human goodness in a flawed and corrupt world. The Idiot is a novel about the collision between idealism and reality, about what happens when a person of absolute moral purity is placed in a world that is anything but pure. This tension between Myshkin's innocence and the corruption of the society around him is what gives the novel its enduring power and relevance. Prince Myshkin, the idiot of Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Idiot, is a man whose simplicity and purity stand out in a world dominated by ambition, greed, and deceit. His return to Russia from Switzerland, where he had been receiving treatment for epilepsy, is like the arrival of a lamb into a den of wolves. But this lamb is no ordinary one. His innocence, far from being a weakness, is his most perplexing and dangerous trait. To those around him, Mishkin seems foolish, weak, and out of place in society. But his presence, in truth, exposes the corruption and moral decay of everyone he meets. Dostoevsky begins by throwing his protagonist into the fast-paced, complex environment of St. Petersburg society. Mishkin arrives with nothing, no wealth, No influence, yet he is immediately absorbed into the web of personal and political struggles that envelop the other characters. His innocence is not a mask. It is a natural state of being, which is disarming for people accustomed to playing manipulative social games. Mishkin is like a mirror held up to those around him, reflecting their flaws with a clarity that disturbs them. The story opens with Mishkin traveling by train to St. Petersburg, where he strikes up a conversation with Rogozhin, a passionate and volatile young man. Rogozhin, who is obsessed with the beautiful and tormented Nastasia Filipovna, quickly recognizes something unusual in Mishkin. Unlike everyone else in Rogozhin's life, Mishkin is not driven by the desire to possess, control, or dominate others. Instead, he speaks openly and without guile, a trait that both fascinates and unnerves Rogozhin. This initial meeting foreshadows the tragic entanglement of their lives, with Mishkin, Nastasia, and Rogozhin forming a complex triangle that will ultimately spiral out of control. Dostoevsky uses this triangle to explore deeper themes of love, obsession, and self-destruction. Mishkin's feelings for Nastasia are not those of a typical suitor. He sees her as a kindred soul, someone who has been deeply wounded by life, and who, like him, yearns for something pure, something beyond the superficial games of society. But where Mishkin seeks to save her, Rogozhin wants to possess her entirely. Nastasia, in turn, is torn between these two extremes. She is drawn to Mishkin's compassion and goodness, but she cannot escape the dark pull of Rogozhin's passion. The push and pull between these forces, innocence and corruption, love and possession, are at the heart of the novel. Mishkin's innocence is both his strength and his downfall. He moves through the world without suspicion, assuming the best in people even when they have shown him their worst. This makes him vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation, as others project their own desires and schemes onto him. Yet, in a deeper sense, it is Mishkin who has the upper hand. His very presence forces others to confront the darkness within themselves. This is most clearly seen in his interactions with Nastasia. Though she teases and ridicules him and ultimately rejects him, she is deeply affected by his kindness. She recognizes in Mishkin something that she has long since lost, a sense of hope and redemption that she no longer believes she deserves. Mishkin's innocence, however, does not shield him from pain. His love for Nastasia, though pure, is tinged with sorrow. He sees her suffering and wants to alleviate it, but he is powerless to do so. Nastasia's self-destructive tendencies, fueled by her guilt and shame, lead her deeper into despair, and Mishkin can only watch helplessly as she spirals out of control. Rogozhin's obsessive love for Nastasia only exacerbates the situation, pushing her further toward ruin. In the end, Nastasia's tragic fate becomes inevitable, and Mishkin is left devastated by the realization that he could not save her. Dostoevsky brilliantly contrasts Mishkin's innocence with the moral corruption of the other characters. Throughout the novel, we see how the people around Mishkin are driven by selfish motives, whether it is Ganya's ambition, Rogozhin's obsession, or Nastasia's self-loathing. Even those who appear to be well-meaning, like the Epanchins, are ultimately concerned with their own social standing and interests. Mishkin, in contrast, remains untouched by these concerns. He acts out of genuine compassion and concern for others, even when it is to his detriment. At the heart of The Idiot is a profound exploration of the nature of goodness. Mishkin's innocence is not naivety, but rather a conscious rejection of the values that govern the society around him. He sees the world for what it is, yet he chooses to act with compassion and kindness, even when it is met with scorn or indifference. This makes him both a Christ-like figure and a tragic one. His goodness is too pure for the world he inhabits, and in the end, it is this very purity that isolates him from others. One of the most striking aspects of the novel is the way in which Mishkin's innocence brings out the worst in those around him. His presence is a silent indictment of their moral failings, and this makes them uncomfortable. Ganya, who is initially willing to marry Nastasia for her money, is deeply humiliated by Mishkin's refusal to engage in such mercenary behavior. Rogozhin, too, is unsettled by Mishkin's lack of possessiveness toward Nastasia. Where Rogozhin wants to control her, Mishkin seeks only to understand and support her. This difference in their approaches to love ultimately drives a wedge between them, culminating in the tragic conclusion of the novel. Mishkin's Innocence also highlights the absurdity of the social games that the other characters play. While they are consumed by their ambitions, jealousies, and petty rivalries, Mishkin remains above it all. He does not care about wealth or status, and he treats everyone with the same kindness and respect, regardless of their social standing. This makes him both admirable and pitiful in the eyes of those around him. They recognize that there is something noble in his behavior, but they also see it as impractical and foolish in a world where power and influence are everything. Dostoevsky uses Mishkin's innocence as a lens through which to examine the corrupting influence of society. The characters around Mishkin are not inherently evil, but they have been shaped by the values and expectations of the world they live in. Ganya's ambition, for example, is not born out of malice, but rather out of a desire to secure his place in society. Rogozhin's obsession with Nastasia, too, is a reflection of his desperate need for love and validation in a world that offers him little else. Even Nastasia's self-destructive behavior is rooted in the trauma she has experienced at the hands of others. In this way, Dostoevsky suggests that the true source of evil is not within individuals, but within the societal structures that shape their desires and actions. Throughout the novel, there is a sense of inevitability to the tragedy that unfolds. Mishkin's innocence, while admirable, is ultimately unsustainable in a world that does not value it. His attempts to bring goodness and compassion into the lives of those around him are met with resistance, and in the end, he is left broken and alone. The final scenes of the novel, in which Mishkin cradles the body of the murdered Nastasia, are a powerful indictment of the society that has destroyed them both. Mishkin's goodness, which should have been a source of salvation, is instead consumed by the corruption and violence of the world around him. Dostoevsky's The Idiot is a deeply philosophical and psychological exploration of the nature of goodness, innocence, and moral corruption. Through the character of Prince Myshkin, Dostoevsky challenges the reader to consider the role of innocence in a world that often rewards greed and ambition. Mishkin's innocence is not a flaw, but rather a radical rejection of the values that govern the society around him. In this way, he serves as both a Christ-like figure and a tragic hero, whose purity ultimately leads to his downfall. The novel's conclusion leaves the reader with a sense of profound sadness and resignation. Mishkin, who had once been a symbol of hope and redemption, is reduced to a state of near madness, unable to cope with the weight of the world's corruption. Nastasia, too, is destroyed by the forces of society. Her beauty and innocence are consumed by the greed and obsession of those around her. In the end, it is Rogozhin, the character who most embodies the destructive forces of society, who remains standing, his obsession with Nastasia having led him to murder her in a fit of jealous rage. Yet, despite the bleakness of the novel's ending, there is a sense that Mishkin's innocence has not been entirely in vain. His presence has touched the lives of those around him in ways that they cannot fully understand or appreciate. Ganya, for example, is deeply changed by his interactions with Mishkin, and even Rogozhin, in his own twisted way, recognizes the purity of Mishkin's intentions. In this way, Dostoevsky suggests that while innocence may not be enough to change the world, it can still have a profound impact on the lives of those it touches. The Idiot is a powerful and deeply moving exploration of the nature of innocence and goodness in a world that often rewards selfishness and greed. Through the character of Prince Myshkin, Dostoevsky challenges the reader to consider what it means to be truly good in a society that is built on corruption and deception. Mishkin's innocence is both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness, and in the end, it is this very purity that leads to his downfall. Yet, despite the tragedy of his fate, there is a sense that Mishkin's presence has not been in vain. His goodness, though ultimately unsustainable, serves as a beacon of hope in a world that desperately needs it. This novel is not just a story about a single man's downfall, It is a profound commentary on the human condition, the complexities of love, and the tragic consequences of a world that fails to nurture goodness. Dostoevsky leaves us with a sense of melancholy and resignation, but also with a haunting question. Is there a place for true innocence in a corrupt world, or is it doomed to be destroyed? Mishkin's fate, in all its tragedy, forces us to confront this uncomfortable truth.